Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. Watch, chop, retrofit.
We went there one time at the bar. The two times we were playing, the bartender was playing this like the pop punk and/or new metal playlist. She was like, "It smells like sweaty balls in here," metaphorically. You know what I mean? Like,
that's funny.
So I was like, okay, so if we're gonna drive it, I can see at night, okay, but if I'm gonna be like drinking and driving at night, then like I don't know.
But this isn't a night driving podcast.
Oh, I didn't realize I was doing the banter.
You did the banter.
True
That was
banter.
great. That was great.
True banter.
This is Cinema Chop Shop. It's a movie podcast where we get together and talk about movies and such. And we're glad that you're with us this evening. I'm your host, Sean. I'm joined by Joey Poole.
Hello. This is not an old man podcast, as you say.
And Travisito.
I'm here as well.
Yes, and who's not here?
Todd, he didn't sleep in. If he had slept in, he would have been pulling a Travis because I did that one time. I slept in and like didn't know what was going on when Sean called me, but Todd forgot what day it was.
He had the wrong day for the podcast.
In his defense, he and I are on spring break.
Nice. Look at all your shit.
So Todd will be missed, and he was prepared for this episode because he texted me quite a bit leading up to this. So I know that he did do the
Yeah,
homework.
you could hear in his voice on speakerphone that he was really regretting it already.
I think the word is crestfallen.
Yes.
We will tarry on without him. We're going to be talking about New Hollywood. This was your recommendation,
It
Travis.
was.
And I can't believe that we've not done a New Hollywood episode. Now, we've done New Hollywood movies
Yes.
that fit into this category. But,
And directors.
and the directors that are synonymous with it. Who wants to kick off by talking about New Hollywood and what that means?
Well, I've got a kind of a cookie cutter thing about the cinematic movement. It spans from roughly the late 60s to the early 80s. Revolutionary period in American filmmaking that saw a shift from the traditional studio-controlled system to a more director-driven approach.
And what that really means is there was much like in the beer industry where breweries owned the bars, so to speak. A lot of times, movie theaters were run by the studios.
Right.
They ran all of their pictures and no one else's, and so this monopoly system existed. And so that was kind of on the way out.
And the new trend was that the creatives were calling more of the shots.
Right, absolutely. The studios weren't necessarily the ones driving the ship. Also, you had all these influences of French New Wave and Japanese films that were kind of influencing these directors. I think another thing about the New Hollywood period that I think resonates, especially with the early foundational works, is kind of this loss of the American dream. Mm-hmm. I think that's a theme that you kind of see repeated over and over. It's just
a lot of 70s, not just cinema, but a lot of 70s, artwork and artistic output is about the death of that hippie dream too. So that kind of ties into that theme maybe too.
Yeah, and it was a term that was, given to the movement by the press. It's just a label that was slapped on, but it kind of stuck. We definitely refer to it that way. I mean, some of our directors that kind of are associated with this are your Coppolas.
Well, it gave rise to this dream team, this league of extraordinary gentlemen.
Yeah, your Coppolas, your Scorseses, your Spielberg, George Lucas. Who are some of the other ones? Mike Nichols, which I'll be talking about.
Robert Altman.
Friedkin, John Borman. The list goes on
Yes.
and on and on. We could sit here and talk about them ad nauseum. Then, of course, the question becomes, what was the first movie in the movement? What was the catalyst for it? And there are a few early front runners. I'll be talking about one of them tonight.
Okay.
But I don't think that there is anything that you can label as being, yes, this is the start and this is the end. But they all, the movement just kind of amorphously kind of shifted into this kind of pessimistic, cynical kind of approach to the subject matter.
I was going to say it kind of mirrors what happened specifically in the Western genre, I think, in that you had your old school Hollywood, John Wayne, Searchers type Westerns in the mid-century period. And then as the spaghetti Westerns and the grittier
revisionist Westerns.
Exactly, kind of came into vogue in the late 60s.
Yeah.
That kind of ushered in a new aesthetic, and this kind of is a similar thing.
And that's another thing that New Hollywood did was that they played upon some of these, I don't want to call them tropes, but some of the genres and the type of pictures that were associated with the classic Hollywood cinema, the cop drama, the crime procedural, the Western even, and the war movies. And the movement was to kind of take those and kind of put a twist on them or re-examine them with a new sensibility.
And getting back to what you were talking about, the loss of the American dream also, and an examination, like a heavier examination of American culture and what it is to be American, and questioning authority and anti-establishment themes were becoming more prevalent in movies.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you've got the backdrop of the Vietnam War happening as well. So you have this disillusionment of the American populace that also drove those movies down that path as well.
I wonder what you would call the generation of filmmakers after the New Hollywood filmmaker movement. Like, what is the movement that follows New Hollywood?
Like, who are your Wes Andersons?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a label for them. I mean, digital generation. I don't know.
It's a good question.
I feel like, this happens kind of like with every movement in film or music or whatever, but like, just like a lot of the hippies became yuppies in the 80s.
Yeah.
So like a lot of especially the one that I'm going to be highlighting later, a lot of the new Hollywood directors kind of started out as these kind of gritty auteurs making these kind of like anti-establishment kind of movies, which weren't really anti-establishment because they were very much within the Hollywood system, but just maybe a new incarnation of it. But then by the time the 80s rolls around, they're pumping out blockbusters, for the most part, especially with the pick I'm going to make later. So.
Well, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into our first round.
We're going to go round robin.
We'll do round robin with our three directors that each of us have picked. And the first half, we'll talk about their foundational works that kind of set them in stone as kind of a new Hollywood director. And then we'll come back from the break and we'll kind of talk about some of their later works and see how they held up. So, Joey, kick it off.
Well, I made the most basic bitch choice possible. I chose Steven Spielberg.
Oh, good.
For this one.
There was a question mark on the docket by Spielberg, and I wasn't sure if you were actually going to go with that. It's good you did, because I've got trivia for him.
Oh, good deal. The movie that I chose is his debut feature, 1971. It's called Duel. I was vaguely aware of this movie. I don't think I knew that Steven Spielberg had directed it before I did the research for this episode. Sean tipped me off on this one a little bit.
Okay.
1971, it's his debut.
Yeah.
The thing that I find most interesting about this movie as it relates to this category is that this is not very much like what you think of as a Steven Spielberg movie on the surface. But I think that what we see here is the same balance between action-driven plot and an attention to character in such a way that he has a knack for making us care about what's happening on the screen.
I think that you also get into a dynamic of predator and prey, which we'll see later in his career.
Which previews Jaws, obviously,
Yes.
which would come a couple of years down the road. But 1971, Duel stars Dennis Weaver as David Mann, who is a sort of mild-mannered salesman type who goes on a road trip in order to we don't know exactly what he's doing, but he has to meet with someone in order to save his business. And he's road tripping through the desert Southwest, and there's a rusty old tanker driving fairly slowly on the highway, belching black smoke, and he very innocently just passes it he doesn't honk his horn, he's not flipping him off or anything, he just passes him, thinks nothing of it, and then a few minutes later the truck barrels past him, blaring the horn, almost runs him off the road, and sets into motion this kind of cat and mouse game, which plays out over the rest of the movie. You mentioned, I think you were talking about Jaws earlier. Right. This one has a lot of parallels to Jaws, I think. We don't really see the shark doesn't make very many appearances in the film. When we do see it, we only see parts of it, obviously. We never see the truck driver in this film, and there is that kind of cat and mouse, predator-prey kind of relationship, mild-mannered sort of thing. And like I said earlier, the thing that strikes me about this movie is how we don't really think of Steven Spielberg, and this is probably unfair, we don't really think of Steven Spielberg as a serious director in the same ways that a lot of the other directors that we're going to talk about tonight, Francis Ford Coppola, Scorsese, Robert Altman.
Well, now, why do you think that
Friedkin.
is? Because I have an idea why.
Well, he has his fair share of quote unquote serious movies.
Yes.
I mean, Schindler's List, obviously, The Color Purple, Saving Private Ryan. But we think of him, or at least I do, as kind of the architect and the founding father of the kind of 80s mall cinemaplex blockbuster.
They're family friendly.
Yeah, E.T., we mentioned Jaws, E.T., the Raiders of the Lost Ark trilogy, Indiana
Jurassic
Jones, Jurassic Park, which I just started a rewatch of the franchise a couple of days ago.
Okay.
All these kind of movies are kind of what he's become synonymous with those things. This one, I think, kind of presages all that stuff in that it shows that he has actual chops, that the chops that he has as a director are what makes those blockbuster type movies work. That's why they were these huge phenomenons that they were. And you can see that on display here in Duel. Also think it's interesting, and this is kind of a side note, this is a movie in some ways that was about toxic masculinity before that was ever
Even a
term.
concept, yeah.
The guy's name is David Mann.
Right.
He's driving a Valiant through the through the desert, and never once has he decided to just, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to turn around and go back home and let this guy, this kind of this road rage thing gets just escalated over the entire course of the movie. And even the script really lays heavily into that. When we first encounter him, he's listening to a radio show, and a guy calls in asking a question about the census, and he says, well, I just don't know how I should should I write it up as I'm the head of the household, because I'm the man, but my wife is the one who actually works right now. I'm out of work, and she's the breadwinner, and I take care of our kids, and I just don't know how I should write this up on the thing, and he's embarrassed by it. So that kind of like underscores everything that happens in the movie. And then there's a whole dynamic between Dennis Weaver's character, David Mann, and his wife, which comes out in a phone call as well. But so it's a movie that explores all that kind of stuff. But at its heart, it's just a really good, enjoyable action flick that balances character and action in a way that would fuel all those blockbusters to come down the road. Including one that I'll look at as my bookend piece after the thing, which we'll talk about that later.
So you mentioned his name, David Mann. Mann, obviously, to be like a generic human person, every guy, right? But I wonder also the choice of the name David. Like when you think of what could David be an allusion to? We think of King David, right?
Goliath. Yeah.
David and Goliath.
David and Goliath.
Yeah.
So, but also he's considered one of like the founding fathers of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
You could also have a metaphor there of the persecution of the Jewish people as well.
Yeah, there's so much cool stuff in this movie. I was exposed to this as a kid, probably about 10, 11, 12 years old. So it really resonated at that age of this very simple story. This great pacing, great editing. And of course, like you make the comparison.
It's like a quintessential drive-in movie.
It is, but you also you drew the comparison to Jaws. That truck was so like out of legend. It's just dirty, dusty. It wouldn't have passed inspection. So there's so much mythical quality to that truck in this movie.
You never see the driver.
Yeah,
and you see his arm out the window
choice.
a couple of times. That's it.
Fantastic choice on Spielberg's part.
I think you can't really talk about Spielberg's career without talking about George Lucas, because they were friends, and they were, if not rivals. And George Lucas gets lumped in with New Hollywood, but I think he's also an outlier in that sense that he was extremely successful with family-friendly films, much like Spielberg.
Yeah, but you look at American Graffiti,
right,
and THX,
number.
Very much in keeping with this kind of mentality we're talking about, this disillusionment. That, you have on the one end you have this very dystopian sci-fi kind of movie, and then on the other you have this Innocence Lost kind of precursor to Happy Days. So he has his chops too. Granted, and that's I didn't want to select Spielberg because my thoughts on Spielberg are very well known over the course of this show, but also Lucas, I didn't want to go down that road either because I think he made such a hard right turn out of the new Hollywood into the blockbuster, even more so than Spielberg. There are other people in
The
this
merchandisable.
Yeah,
blockbuster.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there are other people in this pool that we can choose from, I think, that are more true to the idiom of this new Hollywood directors. Travis?
You want a fun fact on
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a couple. The first one, so in Close Encounters from 1977, the humans and aliens use music and computers to communicate. Spielberg's father was a computer scientist and his mother was a musician. This fact was pointed out to Steven Spielberg on Inside the Actors Studio, to the great delight of James Lipton. Steven Spielberg was the first living person to have a playable Lego minifigure modeled after him. It was sold with several sets as part of the Lego Studios product range in the early 2000s. I guess
Weird.
the rest of them were all fictional.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess they were fictional characters based. Yeah.
So those are your fun facts about
Nice.
Steven Spielberg. Is it over to me?
It's over to you for yours, man.
All right, so I went with Robert Altman, who people are familiar with. His name is not exactly a household name, but well known. He is interesting because he was affected by the Vietnam War, and that changed his kind of outlook. He supposedly was radicalized against war and against establishment stuff when visiting Vietnam. As a new Hollywood director, he occupies a place in that movement because he's regarded as one of the most innovative and influential directors. He emerged in the late 60s and early 70s, and that era marked a shift away from traditional studio system towards more experimental films and director-driven approach to filmmaking, and Altman was key to that. And his distinctive directorial style, which broke away from conventional filmmaking norms. His films were characterized by their ensemble casts, which is an understatement considering the movie I'm about to talk about with regard to that movie. Overlapping dialogue, which is something that some people might find annoying, is people talking over each other.
But that's the way people talk.
Yeah, it sounds more realistic. It's more of a cinema verite approach. And complex, often fragmented or non-linear narratives, which is something we would see the next generation, like your Tarantinos, run with. Altman was less concerned with linear plots and singular protagonists and more interested in creating a sense of atmosphere and capturing complexity of human relationships. His two biggest foundational works are MASH and Nashville. And we've talked about MASH before on the show, and I think the listeners and people in general are more familiar with the movie MASH than they are with Nashville, probably because the spin-off TV show was so insanely popular. But Nashville I had never seen before, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And I guess that new TV show Nashville is supposed to be loosely based on this film, but as far as I can tell, that's where the comparison or the similarities end, is with the name. So in the movie Nashville, it's set in the 1970s, the same time period that it came out, and it's in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's an election year. We're in the midst of primary season, and this third-party candidate named Hal Philip Walker is campaigning hard. He's already won 3 primaries as a third-party candidate, and his party, he calls it the Replacement Party. And we never actually see this candidate, Walker. We do
Much like
see,
the truck driver in Duel.
Yes, absolutely. Much like that, except it's a van. There's a van that goes all over town, and there's this constant, monotone, very mundane speaking voice talking about all of his platform points, which are kind of crazy stuff. Like, he wants to change the national anthem, and he wants to know why Christmas smells like oranges, and like he wants to tax all churches, and
Hey, now.
Yeah.
I agree there.
and so that's going on. And then you have all of these other people. There's 24 principal characters in the movie. And they range from musicians to political aides to law enforcement to managers to groupies to the whole gamut. They're made up of an incredible ensemble cast. I'm not going to be able to name all 24, but some of the standouts, you've got Shelley Duvall. You've got a scantily clad Shelley Duvall, which I know Sean will like. She's a groupie who goes by L.A. Joan, but her real name is like Morgan or something. You've got Keith Carradine. He's not David Carradine, not the one who's dead, and not the nerd, the other one, Keith Carradine. He's part of a rock band, kind of a Peter, Paul, and Mary type thing. Lily Tomlin is part of a gospel singing group. Ned Beatty is a good old boy / local promoter. Speaking of Jurassic Park and The Fly,
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum shows up. He's constantly riding this trike motorcycle around, this low rider trike motorcycle, but he never says a word. He's always wearing like a cowboy hat and sunglasses, never says a word. There is a lot of that overlapping dialogue and a lot of nonlinear structure. It's all leading up to a gala for that candidate, that political candidate, where all of these people are going to perform or are in some way involved in that event. And throughout the film, Altman's been dropping clues to something that's going to happen at this event. So in the airport scene, we see a sign that says all passengers are screened for weapons. And then there's this guy who seems kind of out of place. We're not really sure why we're following him. He's come to town for a few weeks and he's carrying a violin case. Oh, also, I'm skipping over Brenda Jean. Brenda Jean is like your Loretta Lynn character. She's beloved, but she's kind of, unlike Loretta Lynn, she's kind of fragile. She passes out getting off the plane and has to go to the hospital. She performs at Opryland and gets dragged off stage because she's kind of rambling between her songs. She's the headliner for this gala. So she's out there performing. It's going well. And then shots ring out. And it's the guy with the violin case. He had a pistol in his hand. And on the outside of the violin case is a picture of Hal Philip Walker. And so he's intending to assassinate this third-party candidate, but he accidentally shoots Brenda Jean.
Oh, no.
And she's carried off the stage. We don't know if she's dead or alive when they carry her off. And one of the other characters, who's kind of an older country guy, but he reminds me of Evel Knievel. He's kind of flamboyant. He's been grazed by a bullet, but he is like, they can't do this to us in Nashville. Everybody sing. And he gets somebody to come out and sing while they take him away. And the crowd ends up singing "It Don't Bother Me," which sounds at least like a traditional country song. And then we roll credits.
Wow.
And it was interesting. I had to do it in two parts because it is a long run. It's got a 2 hour and 39-minute runtime. It's good if you know what you're in for. You have to expect this is a Robert Altman movie. It's an ensemble cast on steroids, and it's dialogue driven, but not all of the dialogue is going to necessarily
drive the plot.
It's not going to be exposition.
Okay.
So why is this a foundational movie in New Hollywood? We've got the ensemble cast, which I mentioned, and multiple storylines. The use of sound and dialogue. Altman was known for his innovative use of sound, particularly overlapping dialogue. In Nashville, he had characters speak over each other in a way that mimicked real-life conversations, creating a more immersive and realistic soundscape. Also, satire of American culture, which we mentioned. It serves as a sharp critique of American politics, celebrity culture, and the commercialization of the music industry, and a focus on ordinary people. It's a good people-watching movie. Now, a lot of those people are white, but Altman's New Hollywood films are centered around flawed, everyday characters instead of heroic protagonists, reflecting a more cynical view of the American dream. And then also, he collaborated with the musicians in the film. The film's soundtrack, which was a key part of its success, featured original music by many of the country music stars that were featured in the film. Finally, the big one that I think is the definitive characteristic of a new Hollywood film is it challenged Hollywood conventions.
I feel like I haven't seen this movie yet, and this movie's kind of accrued a little bit of like legendary status for me over the years because I know a lot of people who love it, and I have not seen it, and I have it on my docket to watch later this year. But I feel like if you had made what makes it kind of new Hollywood is that if you had made a movie called Nashville with a similar premise a generation before, it would have been some hee-haw bullshit, much like Kissing Cousins that we talked about not long ago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There is still some cringe to it. There's some cringe because, like it or not, for a long time, country wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. It was kind of cornbally and knowingly so. But you're absolutely right. It is that, but it's also poking fun at that in this movie. So, in conclusion, it's a quintessential example of new Hollywood filmmaking, blending innovation, social commentary, and cinematic risk-taking. Fun fact on Robert Altman. Oh, we know this one. We've talked about this before. His son, Mike Altman, wrote the lyrics for Suicide is Painless, which is the theme song for MASH, when he was only 14 years old, which is a heavy fucking theme for a 14-year-old. Upon receiving an honorary Oscar at the 2006 Academy Awards, Altman revealed that he had been the recipient of a heart transplant approximately 10 years prior, so in 96, and he hadn't gone public about it for fear that it would hinder his ability to get work.
Wow.
A heart transplant.
I'm going to talk about Mike Nichols.
Okay. I'm interested in this because we were talking the other night about
Mike
he's kind
Nichols
of enigmatic.
Enigmatic is a great word. Another, I would call it casual. A lot of people don't have anything bad to say about Mike Nichols. There are 2 documentaries. I say documentaries. It's just kind of like just people talking about him on Max, on HBO Max. You can watch both of them. And the guy had a tremendous career leading up to his career in film. He was a part of a comedy writing team, he and Elaine May. The couple was Nichols and May. Several albums, tremendously successful and popular. And then he pivots from this and gets into directing musicals and stuff and plays on Broadway. He directed The Odd Couple. He directed Barefoot in the Park. So he had all this going for him, and then he says, well, fine, I'll go direct a movie. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things where he just said, it's not like Mike Nichols was driven to direct in Hollywood. It was just something he did.
Right.
And he did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Great movie.
Great movie. And then immediately after, he did what is considered to be one of the catalyst films behind the new Hollywood movement, that and Bonnie and Clyde. This being, of course, The Graduate, 1967, starring Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, and Catherine Ross. We've covered this on the show before. It's been ages. Just a quick synopsis of the movie. Benjamin Braddock, played by Dustin Hoffman, has just finished college and is back at his parents' house. He's trying to avoid the one question everyone keeps asking. What does he want to do with his life? An unexpected diversion crops up when he is seduced by Mrs. Robinson, played by Anne Bancroft, a bored housewife and friend of his family. But what begins as a fun tryst turns complicated when Benjamin falls for the one woman Mrs. Robinson demanded he stay away from, and that's her daughter, Elaine.
Right.
And a lot of music by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yep.
Lots and lots. And my forever core memory about this movie is that it's like 3 songs repeated 4 times each. You got to know that going into it. Why is this a foundational new Hollywood movie? Well, it starts out with this disillusionment and this uncertainty. This well-to-do, white privileged family has a party for their son who's home from college. He's a track star, and he's very smart, and he has the world ahead of him. And he is so gripped by anxiety at this party because, as he tells everyone, I'm really worried about my future. He's just overly concerned with what's to come because he just doesn't know what's around the bend. And that kind of is shared by a lot of people. And I think that feeling is probably shared by a lot of people today.
Yeah. I think it's a universal
It
feeling.
is a universal thing, but it's probably one of the first times that it was pointed out in film where your young man from college the movie wasn't about him going out and getting chicks. It was about him trying to figure out what to do with his life.
And expectations on him from those around him.
Right. So that was a bit of a twist. That's not what we were used to seeing. I mean, we did the Elvis episode earlier this year, and it was always about having a good time and hanging out with friends and getting a girl, So it is a different tone.
Those were usually back from the army, though, not back from college.
Exactly. And then, of course, the other component to this is the Mrs. Robinson seducing him.
If you ever date or marry, in my case, a older woman, they love it when you call them Mrs. Robinson.
I'm sure they do. One thing, this is the third time I've seen this movie in preparation for this episode, which was, boy, she was aggressive. Mm-hmm. She aggressively goes after him.
That's what struck me upon rewatch of it not too terribly long ago as well.
Yeah, she went hard.
Is
at
she
him.
the first cougar in pop culture?
I don't know, but boy, she really kind of set the tone.
She is one of the most memorable. I don't know if she's the first. I bet there's some film noir cougars.
Yeah.
But give me a minute and I could probably think of them. But she certainly is one of the most memorable.
And shameless. I mean, I'm an alcoholic, and I want to have sex with you, and this is just going to be a thing. And
would the lady in Hollywood Boulevard be considered a cougar?
Yeah, probably.
In ways?
Probably.
Wait, are we?
I'm ready for my close-up. Hollywood Boulevard?
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
Excuse me.
Boulevard. My lovely wife came into this as I was watching it. She entered the room a few times periodically, and she made some comments about the movie, how it's very much almost like a Romeo and Juliet kind of story. You've got with Dustin Hoffman and Catherine Ross's character. And it does kind of play out in that regard of Romeo and Juliet being completely clueless and dumb. At the end of the film, at the end of the film, when he shows up to interrupt this wedding and she decides to bail on her fiance at the altar and hops in the car with him with more uncertainty in front of them, but they're happy about it. She was infuriated by that ending. She's just like, this is so dumb. They're so dumb. But I digress.
Gotcha.
And I'll in the second half, I'll talk a little bit more about what Mike Nichols did with the rest of his career. But this was probably his obviously his second film. As a director, he did a great job. It's got mood. It's got a certain quirkiness. I consider this to be a precursor to like a Wes Anderson.
Yeah, it's got a color aesthetic. Like picturing this movie, I picture like certain colors, like greens and like jade colors.
It has a color aesthetic, but it also has a certain amount of not so much in visual arrangement, but it has like everything is at its certain place at its certain pace that Wes Anderson's really good at maintaining. And I think that's noteworthy in this movie, is that it all has this certain kind of cadence to it that it follows. And it's a good movie. I just wish it had a more diverse soundtrack.
Yeah.
All right, give me some trivia about it.
He and his younger brother Robert fled Berlin in Nazi Germany for the USA in 1939 due to increasing atrocities. He's the 9th person and 6th man to receive the status of EGOT. And he was, this is a funny one. He was interested in directing First Blood in 1982, but he wanted to cast Dustin Hoffman as Rambo. Little Big Rambo. Would have been a completely different movie.
Wow.
That would have been
I can't usually
turn.
When things like this happen, and I can at least picture it, or I can picture the alternate universe in which this was a thing, but like I can't even conceptualize what Dustin Hoffman would have been like in First Blood.
I'm definitely an excellent marksman.
Yes. All right.
Do you think that he would have done like a pump up routine and he would have tried to go like full action star? I mean, that was wow.
I don't think so. I think it would have been
can't
much
see him doing
different
it
in film. Yeah, this I think that Mike Nichols was probably thinking along the terms of a Deer Hunter Part 2.
Yeah.
That kind of tone.
Yeah.
Oh well. Wow. What could have been?
Indeed.
All right, so that's going to be the end of the first half. We're going to take a break and go pee in the yard, but not before we say,
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves some new Coke and Nashville hot chicken.
oh, good call.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go.
And we're back. We all peed in the yard.
I did.
To a man, we all peed in the yard.
What?
We all did, all three of us.
Oh, okay. It sounded like you said to a man.
To a man.
We peed in the yard to a man?
Down to
Not on a man, Travis. To
each of us. Every man. Anyway.
Okay.
Joey, what do we sometimes like to do?
Well, Sean, we like to drink beer and we like to talk about drinking beer.
Well, you brought something you said that is on theme. I
Yes,
want to know how.
it's on theme for my particular pick. So I chose Steven Spielberg as my new Hollywood pick, which I think is the most basic bitch pick possible in this category. And this is a pretty basic bitch IPA here we have. So the story behind this is we were at the beach a couple of weeks ago. And I
Basic
told my
beach.
wife, I was at a work conference and she went out to get some snacky snacks and whatnot. And I was like, pick me up some beer. What do you want? Oh, I want an IPA. So she got Peak Drift IPA. And I'm pretty sure this is like not a real craft brewery, but one of those like fake craft breweries made by like, I don't
What
know,
do they call
Anheuser
them?
or
Contract
something.
brewers?
Contract brewers.
And it tastes like it's just called Peak Drift, and it even looks like AI designed the can based on IPA. It's like people hiking in the
The algorithm said this is what IPA drinkers want.
and it's just called Hazy IPA.
Yep.
And it tastes like if you ask the Star Trek food synthesizer to synthesize an IPA for you.
Yeah.
That's what it tastes like.
Awesome.
So it's the most basic bitch IPA possible. And,
Apparently,
it's
they're
on
from
form, I think.
apparently they're from Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
They're located on Main Street.
What the fuck does Columbia have to do with drifts of any kind?
That just plays into my theory because like that the images on the can are not in South Carolina. Like it's like
When I think
Rocky
peak,
Mountain hiking or
the
something.
words peak drift, I think skiing, like snow skiing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What the hell? Maybe the person who founded the brewery is an avid skier.
It's not a bad beer. I mean, I drink. This is the 12th one now that I've drank. It's the last one.
Here
And-
tonight.
yeah.
yeah,
doing-
not
you're
tonight.
doing
Yeah,
really
over the
good,
past
by the
couple of
way.
weeks. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
doing
I'd be passed out. But
You're doing really.
awesome.
You're doing really well.
Concise, like you're not hardly even slurring.
You might be crawling out by the end, but you're doing okay, Joey. All right, second half. Let's pick up where we left off. We're going to be hitting our three directors with their later works and seeing how they fared. So, Joey, kick it off.
I agonized over the bookend pick for Steven Spielberg. I thought maybe I should pick a more serious film. I have not yet seen The Fabelmans, and I just frankly was not in the mood to watch it.
It's all right.
Yeah.
So I decided to pick what I think is the bookend to the Hollywood blockbuster part of his career. Now, you might argue that there were later films that fit that category, like Ready Player One, which was all right. But I chose to focus on one that is not all right, and it is Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
Okay.
Oh,
Which is not the most recent and final Indiana Jones installment. Who directed the last one, the Dial of Destiny, by the way? Spielberg did not do that one.
AI.
I don't know.
Well, in the Dial of Destiny was also not great, but in its defense, it was much better than
It was better than Crystal
the
Skull.
Crystal Skull. I remember going to see this. I went and see this with you
Oh, sweet.
and Todd at the Julia.
Yeah.
In 2008 when it came out, and I just remember thinking there was a point that I looked over the movie and I was like, "Are they enjoying this? Like, is this good?"
Did I look like I was enjoying it?
I can't remember. But for me, the part that lost me in this film was with the CGI fire ants.
Yeah.
It wasn't Shia LaBeouf. It wasn't the
The swinging monkeys, the monkey.
It wasn't that.
Vines.
It wasn't Shia. You know, honestly, Shia LaBeouf wasn't terrible in the movie.
He also hadn't fallen from grace.
He
super
hadn't
hard
gone
yet.
full Shia LaBeouf
Yeah.
yet. And I liked what they were trying to do. They were trying to... Spielberg was trying to hand the baton over to Shia LaBeouf. Like,
Yes.
had this movie worked out and had it been better,
Shia LaBeouf would
we
be the
would
new
have
Indiana
had
Jones.
3 or 4. Yeah, we would have had 3 or 4 Shia LaBeouf Indiana Jones movies by now. It did not work out.
Nope.
And it was just... Everything about this movie was just bad. And it was just... I think it was because...
Wasn't the kid's name Mutt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it was as if you said AI. It was as if an AI had written and directed an installment in the Indiana Jones trilogy, or not trilogy, no quadrilogy. At
But
this
you
point.
say trilogy because it should have stayed a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Crusade, last is in the title, should have been the last Indiana Jones movie. It was the perfect ending to a trilogy.
And like I said, the Dial of Destiny was okay. It
James
was
Mangold
for what
was
it
the
was.
director.
Mangold, I was going to say that.
But this is just the Crystal Skull is awful. It's an awful film, and in some ways, I think it's kind of like the death of the big action adventure mall cinemaplex
That's fair.
movie. This movie was its death knell. Now, obviously, we still have those kinds of movies, but honestly, name one since 2010 in the past 15 years.
That was
Name
really good.
one.
They all kind of follow the same.
There's been good ones, but they're indie movies.
All right, so here's, and I don't want to steal your thunder, what your thesis may be about this, but this is where it stops being the new Hollywood, because this is where the studio calls the shots. There is a formula for the blockbuster where it is, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. It's got to be PG-13 or less. It's got to have, and we can't go over budget, so it's going to have all these CGI elements to get us across the finish line.
Bad CGI in this case, especially.
And so, to your point, has there been a great blockbuster? There have probably been some entertaining movies, but they don't have that same cachet that some of these earlier blockbusters, where it was had a little bit more handcraftedness in there.
And movies at some point started looking like video games, and and this one kind of falls into that category, I think. And it's just bad. It is not. It's just. I mean, there's no other way to say this. It is not good.
And I think that it's possible for a film to be heavy in CGI and not necessarily look like a video game. There's some that miss that mark. You get some. I guess that the uncanny valley kind of thing applies.
Well, honestly though, the look of this movie is not the worst thing about it.
Okay.
The story doesn't work, the acting doesn't work. I like the idea of the premise of kind of it's
Speaking
passing
of
it on to the
merchandising, we
next
ended up with
generation.
a whole brand of vodka based on this movie, the Crystal Skull vodka, which is owned by Dan Aykroyd. And I don't know how that ties into Spielberg, but
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think that this one kind of is like the death knell of that. I want to see kind of like what do you think there will ever be? Was the Dial of Destiny the last gasp of this once proud franchise?
you would think so, but we're willing to masturbate anything out these days.
Yeah, and speaking of other Spielberg, like I mentioned this earlier, I just started a rewatch of what's my favorite of those big popcorn franchises in Jurassic Park. I have a real soft spot for those movies. And the first Jurassic Park, which I just rewatched with my family last week, is good.
Yeah.
It's
amazing.
It's a good damn movie.
And nobody had seen anything fucking like that when that hit the screen, man. Wow.
Yeah, and the second one has diminishing returns. Spielberg, if memory serves, did direct Jurassic Park 2: The Lost World.
I believe so.
I believe he did not direct the third one.
That makes sense.
But and it came back for one along the way. That first generation of Jurassic Park movies stands the test of time. Now these newer Chris Pratt ones, are pretty bad. The last one, I've enjoyed them all. Jurassic World Dominion, which came out a couple years ago, is pretty bad.
Are there 3 in the Chris Pratt series
There
now?
are 3
I know there's
of
at least
those, and then this one is supposed to be, they're selling it as if it were kind of like a return to form.
Huh. And this is the newest one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we'll see. It would be hard-pressed to be as bad as the Crystal Skull, though,
So Harrison Ford, they joked quite a bit about him being old Indy in Crystal Skull, and so much so that they kind of eased off a little bit on that in Dial of Destiny. They still made the old jokes, but not as many.
while we're talking about Dial of Destiny, I really think that the best way to end this franchise would have been to leave Indy back, and they go back to, with the Dial of Destiny, they dial it back to like Archimedes.
Yeah.
And he's so in his element and so geeked out to be seeing this stuff alive. And he knows he's kind of near the end of his life. They should have just fucking left him there.
Yeah. If you
that would have been the perfect
if
ending.
You had told me that's how
it
actually did end, I would have believed you, because I don't remember shit about that movie.
I wouldn't if I hadn't watched it again within the past several months.
But he's on one of those Yellowstone spin-offs, and according to my wife, he's still got it.
Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
Oh, Shrinking is fantastic on Apple TV.
And he's in the
Segel.
new Captain America, right?
Yeah, he's the Red Hulk.
Yeah.
Well,
so
CGI he, but
well, he's the Red Hulk.
Yeah.
Really?
He's General Ross or whatever. Yeah.
All right. So back to me with Robert Altman. He's widely celebrated for his creative independence and distinctive voice, although some of his later films have been interpreted by critics as evidence of him, quote, selling out. A couple of examples of that would be Popeye, for one, from 1980. We've talked about Popeye before on the film.
Well, I didn't realize that was a Robert Altman.
Yes, it is.
It's a live-action adaptation of the popular comic strip character, which was a commercial film with a large budget and more mainstream appeal. It also has a linear structure. It's got a limited cast. It's
and it's still weird as fuck.
It is, but it's not any of those things that make a new Hollywood movie a new Hollywood movie. And that perception often stems from his involvement in projects that seemed more commercially driven later in his career. Another example is one that I just saw recently called The Player from 1992. Now, this one does have a huge ensemble cast, but it was kind of, it was more mainstream in its tone. But at the same time, it was kind of a satire of the Hollywood machine, much in the way Nashville was poking fun at the music industry, amongst other things. Some critics saw Altman's way of engaging with the very industry he had often critiqued, suggesting he was more willing to embrace Hollywood conventions. However, many also viewed The Player as a self-aware and satirical commentary on the superficiality of the film industry rather than a true sellout. His later films, such as Dr. T and the Women from 2000 and Gosford Park, while commercially viable and somewhat more polished in tone, still retained elements of his signature style, like ensemble casts, complex narratives, and critiques of social norms. These films demonstrated his ability to adapt the changing landscape with the changing landscape of Hollywood without entirely compromising his artistic integrity. So, did he sell out? A little bit. But did he still maintain some of those things at times? Yes. Overall, while some of Altman's later films may have been more commercially or conventionally structured than his earlier works, many would argue that they still retained his unique voice of critical perspective rather than being clear instances of selling out.
So with Mike Nichols, as I was mentioning, the movie directing thing was just something he did. He could have easily have just been back in the director's chair in the theater. But you start to see through his career, he starts to dovetail the two. He does Biloxi Blues, which was famous on Broadway before it came to film. You've got movies like Postcards from the Edge and Working Girl, which were pretty good. They're not groundbreaking or anything, but they're entertaining. Regarding Henry, which could have easily been a made-for-TV movie with Harrison Ford. He kind of had like a debilitating illness.
It could be a Lifetime movie.
And then you had the hit. I think his low point for me, of course, was Wolf with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. The bad werewolf movie.
Yes.
But, he did The Birdcage, which was Le Cage aux Folles, which an adaptation for English, which, again, the guy's he's just working. He's not trying to reinvent directing. He's not trying to make any huge, groundbreaking innovations in filmmaking. He's just making movies. Primary Colors would be another low point for me. That Bill Clinton-y, John Travolta.
They didn't
thing.
straight up say it was Bill Clinton, but it was Bill Clinton.
Wit, another stage adaptation for film. Angels in America for television for HBO was huge at the time. Early 2000s, about the AIDS epidemic.
Oh, really?
And it was a really good series. Then he comes back in 2004 with Closer, which was really a neat movie with Jude Law and Natalie Portman in it. Yeah. But I'm going to talk about his last movie, which I think he died shortly after this came out, which was Charlie Wilson's War. Again, a fact-based, history-based movie that, depending on how it was handled, could have been done as a TV movie. So it's not like he was, again, he's not doing anything groundbreaking with this movie. As a matter of fact, I actually forgot I watched this movie like a few days after I watched the movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. 2007, Tom Hanks, Julia Roberts, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Joanne Herring, Emily Blunt, and Ned Beatty. It's based on the 1980s U.S. Representative Charlie Wilson from Texas. He's at the behest of Julia Roberts and a CIA agent played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And Charlie Wilson is essentially trying to illegally funnel weapons to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union. And this, of course, is what gave the Afghanistanis the power to start the Taliban.
Yeah.
It kind of got messy, folks. I'm sorry.
That worked out well for us.
Let's be real. But yeah, it's one of those docudramas kind of thing. I mean, there's a certain level of comedy as well thrown in. I say it's forgettable, which is sad as a bookend, but it's a serviceable movie. There's nothing wrong with the movie. It's just it's not great. It's not going to shake you to your core. No. You finish watching it and you're like, huh, that's a thing that happened.
Yeah.
And this director conveyed it to me in a visual format that I understood. So
there's nothing groundbreaking about it.
Yeah. But at the same time, I don't want to bag on Mike Nichols and say that he was losing steam. He was just, again, I think from the word go, Mike Nichols was just directing. That was a job for him. It could have been, again, as I said, it could have been in the theater. It could have been in a musical. It could have been in a film.
And he would remain a consummate professional.
So I don't think that that Mike Nichols ever set out to be an auteur. He never set out to be this great director. It's just a job that he did. So in that regard, I can't knock the guy.
Right.
But at the same time, you start out with The Graduate and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then you start thinking, did he maintain it throughout his career? And it's like,
how could you though, man? Those are two of the all-time classics of American 20th century cinema.
And I just watched Silkwood this week, which was kind of in the middle of his career, and that was again, I mentioned made for TV movies because Silkwood was actually a theatrical release from ABC Pictures.
Oh, wow.
So the ABC network formed its own little studio to put out a theatrical release versus a made-for-TV movie. But it is one of those kind of things where this was based on history, so it is a docudrama, again, something that he's apparently attracted to and he's pretty good at because Silkwood was entertaining. Silkwood got 3 Academy Award nominations. Cher got the Best Supporting Actress nomination. I don't think she got the win. So yeah, Mike Nichols is good. He's talented. He's a good director. I guess at the end of the day, it's unfair for us to expect these directors to maintain the endurance necessary to be innovative throughout the whole run. There are a few exceptions to the rule where you can say that does Scorsese do it throughout his career?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably some highs and lows along the way, but I think that at the end of the day, people are going to speak highly of Scorsese from end to end to a degree.
Right.
But you can't say that for everybody. That's not being realistic.
But it's also kind of analogous to being a fan of a band or a musician before they make it big. And then once they're commercially successful, losing interest because they've sold out.
They sold out.
Right.
Yeah. And
and then also, you have to start pumping out things that are going to keep you relevant. And there's 2 ways to go with that. One, you can keep, do the AC/DC Ramones thing where you make the same fucking album for, 15 times over.
Yeah.
Or you can push the envelope and
go out on a limb.
And go out on a limb. And often those experiments past, mid-career space just aren't really that good because you ran out of ideas, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you shot the wad when you made Mrs. when you made The Graduate and Virginia Woolf, and if you had stopped there, that's a damn good resume.
Yeah.
Those are 2 good movies. I mean,
yeah, he was a good one. So yeah, I guess the reason I go down that path is just to try to put some perspective on New Hollywood, and it can't last forever.
Right.
It couldn't go on forever, and clearly it didn't.
So the next movement that comes along, are we calling it New Hollywood?
New. I don't know. I don't know what you would call it. I'm curious what.
Meta Hollywood.
I think that probably Sean is a Sean Baker fanboy.
He'd be in there.
I think that aesthetic is probably going to come to define this era.
Well, like you were
retrospect.
saying, your Wes Andersons, your Edgar Wrights, Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah.
Did you guys
Well,
see?
I wouldn't call it New Hollywood, though, because
that's
he's
making a
making
musical.
I want to see an alien musical.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
What were you saying, Joey?
I was going to say maybe we'll see Hollywood shift. I mean, South Korea is killing it in world cinema right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that the best movies. If you had to name a place and a time that's pumping out the best movies in the past 10 years, it's fucking South Korea.
It's the future is unwritten, but at the same time and the pendulum swings. I think that Marvel movies are about to realize that they cannot continue to enjoy the success that they have, and I think that that's possibly going to pull things back to this Sean Baker kind of thing where studios might be interested in investing a little bit of money into some of these outlier independent filmmakers and maybe put out some interesting stuff that isn't the formulaic just meat grinder approach to movie making.
How did the latest, speaking of Marvel, how did the latest Captain America do at the box office? Is it bombing or is it?
I'm not sure.
I don't know what it's doing commercially, but apparently critics are not pleased.
Yeah, I heard a lot of bad stuff about it.
The only positive review we've heard so far is from McJunkin, and he said that it ties back to the 2009 Incredible Hulk movie more than he expected.
Well, I know that the bad guy is from the 2009 Hulk movie.
Okay.
In that regard, he's right. I don't know what else they would harken back to, though.
Oh, I think that the MCU, as emblematic of that whole big blockbuster culture that we talked about earlier, is about to reach critical mass.
Yeah, the bubble's
and
gonna
it's
pop.
done that before, though. I mean, but I think it's about to reach critical mass and explode one more time. And I don't know. I think that the new Jurassic Park is really going to, the way that it performs at the box office is going to tell the tale on that whole thing. So we'll see.
All right, that's New Hollywood.
Indeed.
Enjoyed that. Sorry, Todd, you missed out.
I just want to say real quickly, I can't remember the name of the director off the top of my head, but Todd was going to talk about
Frankenheimer.
John Frankenheimer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know a great deal about his career, but I do know that 2 of his movies, The Manchurian Candidate is obviously amazing, but Seconds
is amazing.
is one of the most
I've never seen it.
underrated films I have ever seen. It blew me away when I watched it, and I had never heard of it whatsoever. It is a great film. Y'all check it out.
Yeah. I
Frankenheimer fun fact.
Go.
Famous for his use of innovative camera angles, Frankenheimer was acclaimed for a shot in The Manchurian Candidate, speaking of, that was slightly out of focus. However, he said that was an accident. This is weird. When Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot at the Ambassador Hotel in L.A. in 1968, it was his good friend, John Frankenheimer, who had personally driven him there that day. In the initial confusion following the shooting, Frankenheimer was mistakenly identified as one of the other people shot that night.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in Seconds where there's like a Dionysian orgy, and they're like stomping grapes to make juice and all, and it is, the way it's filmed is phenomenal. I love this movie.
Okay, I got to check it out.
It's on Criterion, and it's good. I like it a lot. Next episode, in a couple weeks, we are going to do a tribute to Gene Hackman. Rest in peace.
Rest in power.
Who passed away just after our last recording. So,
and as of this recording, it's just been revealed more details about the manner in which he passed. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, very tragic and unfortunate.
Yeah,
for a man who
good
had
run though, man.
Had a fantastic run.
25 years old,
and he also knew when to hang it up.
Yes, and we'll get into it when we talk about his body of work.
And this
just
is
a tremendous body of work.
A bracket style episode, which is my favorite format.
They're
I love those.
They're less work. It's more just intuition.
I like those. Yeah, it's fun.
So we'll be back in a couple of weeks with that. Plugs, anybody?
No trivia this week. Don't show up. I won't be there.
Very good. Joe, you got anything?
I just want to plug Seconds again. I know I keep talking about it, but goddamn, it's a good movie.
You're
I
going
love
back for
that
Seconds.
movie.
Seconds and thirds on Seconds. Cool, man. I can't agree more. It was a really good film. I'm still thinking about it. There's some good shit in there. All right. So, yeah, please join us in a couple of weeks when we come back with the Gene Hackman tribute episode. And we're Cinema Chop Shop on all the social medias. We're Cinema Chop Shop Podcast on YouTube as well as Blue Sky. So check us out there where the kids hang out. And please remember to be good to yourself and be good to your neighbor. Love yourself and do kind things for other people. Tell them you love them.
Tell your friends you love them.
Absolutely.
Love you guys.
And in the meantime, please remember to watch, chop, retrofit.